Hey, if you like some of my NBA discussions here, make sure to subscribe to my other channel, which is original NBA content, which I post every week about different NBA topics. And yeah, it's a new channel, so make sure to support it. And yeah, hope you enjoy. Hi, my name is Lyric, and today we are going to be reacting to Reggie Miller gave Steph Curry the blueprint, Offensive Legends, Episode 2, by Thinking Basketball. So, reacting to his highlights, we did the entire Greatest Peak series, and we're on to his Season 2 of the Greatest Peak series. We're just looking at offense, and we've already done the one on Wilt Chamberlain, and now we're on Episode 2 of Reggie Miller, reacting to Reggie Miller's highlights, and now we're going to be looking into, some of his offensive game. I did not expect him to be part of this series. Because, when I think of the greatest offensive players of all time, I think Wilt, Kareem, Magic, Bird, Jordan, maybe some guys that are really good at playmaking, Stockton, Nash, Kidd, in the modern day, Curry, Durant, LeBron, did not expect a guy like Reggie Miller to be part of this series, but it does make sense because he at the time was the greatest shooter of all time, so we're going to see how that gave Steph Curry the blueprint, because obviously Steph Curry is the greatest shooter of all time as of now, and probably for a long ass time because he's pretty far ahead. But yeah, I'm gonna see how he gave him the blueprint. I'm guessing he's talking about how much spacing he gave at the time, in an era with a very little spacing, off-ball movement probably, and yeah. So, and we're gonna see maybe where he thinks Reggie Miller would rank, kind of compared to other legends. We know he doesn't think of him as highly as obviously like Jordan or Robinson, Hakeem, but that's obvious, But we're gonna see how good he thinks Reggie Miller really was. So yeah, as I said in the beginning of the video, go subscribe to the original NBA channel for original NBA videos. I've been really slow uploading there, but there's gonna be more content soon. I just had to go back to school, so I had to deal with a lot more new shit. But I should be getting back into schedule with that channel pretty soon. And yeah, let's begin.
During his prime, Reggie Miller averaged an unassuming.
Subscribe to Thinking Basketball as well before you watch the video. Make sure to watch the original video first before you like to watch my commentary. Just, we're not stealing anything from Thinking Basketball.
21 points, 3 assists, and 3 rebounds per game.
21, 3, and 3 doesn't sound that insane, especially now. I mean, that's Jordan Clarkson numbers now. But at the time, you got to remember, the 90s and early 2000s are literally the lowest scoring era in NBA history, and since like the shot clock era. So yeah, the numbers are deflated.
He only made 5 All-Star teams, which has led many people to view him as an overrated pseudo-star.
He was an all-star who occasionally and memorably could impersonate a superstar on a big stage.
But what if he was so far ahead of his time that he was penalized for the very style that made him effective? What if that style laid the blueprint for a basketball revolution?
A player before his time, you might say.
And actually made Reggie Miller one of the most impactful offensive players of his era.
All right, let's see. Where's Peak Season 2, baby?
The first season of Greatest Peaks was about the best of the best. But this time we're looking at trendsetters, unique archetypes, and even controversial players who make up the legends of NBA offense.
Do you remember the player that you would emulate when you were that age? Like so many kids now, it's like you for them. Like who was your model?
The model was Steve Nash and Reggie Miller.
Steve, that's actually makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you were to say 2 previous players before Steph Curry that you combined to be pretty damn close to Steph Curry, those would probably be the 2 players. I mean,
three-point shot
makes
has
a lot
become
of sense.
An enormous part of basketball, but it took a long time for coaches and players to realize just how efficient it could be. When Miller entered the league in 1998,
these Larry
Bird
Bird passes
held the career record for three-pointers made with 357.
in his career. Steph Curry made that many in one season.
Steph Curry's made more in a single season.
Right.
Among
400 in the
season
for Curry.
Miller was one of the few who was bombing threes at modern rates back in the mid-90s. And the difference between his three-point shooting and the average top scorer then is similar to the difference between Curry's edge over the top scorers of his prime.
Wow, that's actually
Only
insane.
there was no concept that these shots were more valuable back then because raw field goal percentage was the standard for efficiency, and Miller was solid but unspectacular by that measure. No one noticed the difference between long 2s and 3s, so these 2 trips were merely seen as 50% field goal shooting instead of generating 4 points compared to the traditional 2. Here's Hall of Famer George Gervin summarizing a generation that looked down on the 3.
That's the worst shot in basketball. The best three-point shooters shoot under 40% probably.
Miller actually took a
But, bro, you gotta do the math. You gotta make it up. It's worth more,
surprising
man.
number
Come
of
on,
long
guys.
2s because he wasn't hyper-focused on stepping behind the line, instead coming off screens and organically firing from long range. Moving around like this was at the heart of Reggie's game, running around picks for shots, and you couldn't relax for a second because he'd find any opening. The Pacers are down 3 here in the final minute of this playoff game. Miller drives into a double team, kicks it out, and then tries to sprint over to the other side of the court to get open.
Yeah,
only
this
to
off-ball.
cut back to the near side and find
This off-ball movement's actually insane. That is Curry-like right there. With just how much off-ball movement and trickery he's doing right there without even
a
having the
little
ball.
spot on the sideline to tie the game.
For a 3, yeah. Pretty sure we saw that highlight in the highlight video, yeah. That's a... Yeah, I didn't realize all the off-ball shit that was going on there, though.
Reggie's
as
not
well.
the first player to run around in circles and play catch me if you can. But Miller was the first movement-heavy shooter to use the three-point line well
Which makes the off-ball even more
before
valuable.
it was in vogue. This is the exact
He has a weird... Once again, I said this in the highlight videos, too. He has a weird jump shot for someone who's so good at
same
threes.
style Steph Curry used to unlock his off-ball value 2 decades later.
Yeah.
Running around as the centerpiece of the Warriors'
Greatest off-ball
motion
gravity,
heavy
off-ball
offense
movement of all time
into
right there with Curry.
threes or backdoor cuts for layups. Miller was one of the best ever at finding soft spots in the defense and cutting into open space.
Ooh, that's a...
He
Nah, that
often
was a...
started down on the baseline with the
good
option
sight
to
there.
run off
Good
a
vision.
weak side screen or use the screen right in front of him to come back and get it for a jumper. If his defender trailed him too wide around that pick, he could curl in for a drive to the basket. Then when the defender starts anticipating that cut, Reggie flies out to the other side, and in each of these situations, he's reading his defender and using their positioning against them to find an opening to attack. Watch what he does to
The thing also with this is that,
against
people, if you notice, it's easier to get it's a bit easier to get a 3-point shot there, but it's more frowned upon to do it. But if you really had the mentality of a modern player, you know, even more hyped up, not just compared to his peers, but like to the level of modern day, he could shoot a lot more threes because there's not nearly as much defenders around the 3-point line. It's a lot easier to get off a 3 at this time because there's so many players packed into the paint.
them to find an opening to attack. Watch what he does to Michael Jordan here. Faking to the near corner. Jordan doesn't bite, so Miller flares to the other side. Only the pass never comes, and when Jordan goes under the screen, then Reggie heads toward the ball just to set him up for a backdoor into that tiny crease.
That was a nice fake on Jordan.
Players like Jordan
Very
did
nice.
their damage with the basketball, rising right up over defenders or countering with the dribble.
Jordan's so
crossing over
satisfying to
change
watch, man.
directions into a pull-up. But Miller's counters were off-ball, so they weren't as celebrated or as easy to notice. He's down on the baseline here to use.
Yeah, there's no stats for off-ball movement and gravity and, you know, just how valuable you are. There's no real stats that show how valuable you are without the basketball, you know, on offense or defense, really. I mean, there's maybe some defensive stats, but yeah, I mean, it's really hard to track that, even though it's one of the most, if not the most, one of the most important aspects of basketball, because there's a big ass period of the game where you just don't have the basketball. You're not gonna have the basketball most of the game unless you're like, you know, one of the fucking a ball hog, you know, or one of the best players in the world with the ball, you know.
Screen, and when Jordan shoots the gap, Miller just counters by flaring it to the corner for.
Dude, his fakes and off ball are so good.
When Jordan shoots
Like,
the
look
gap,
at this. This is on Jordan
Miller
too.
just
Hard to get this guy to fake.
counter
He really looks like he's gonna take a wing
by
three
Flynn.
there, but then he just walks the way he just
Into
fakes
the corner
backwards.
for a wide open
That's
three.
genius. Jordan got
So
juked.
in the final minutes
Missed
of that
it, but it's
game,
all right.
Jordan's waiting for Miller to set up near the baseline. So Reggie just instantly pops out behind the three-point line and drills it critical.
And then he shoots that
three.
one, and he drills it.
The timing of his cuts was all
Dude, his fakes off ball are so
fantastic.
good.
Spotted up
I've never really appreciated this part of this game
in
this
the
much.
corner on this very 1998 possession, then sneaking out of his defender's view so he could dart baseline and save the triple
Oh, yeah.
layup.
That was just a defensive
This is
lapse a
all
little bit right there.
Incredibly difficult to guard, yet it was looked down on
Especially in
back
the
then
90s.
because he was dependent on his teammates to pass him the ball, even though most of
Dumb.
these are fairly basic passes.
Yeah,
But
that's
I
just,
actually
that's
think
dumb.
off-ball players let teammates do more
Mark Jackson helped him with that.
because they don't require the basketball, so they can stress defenses while someone else goes to work.
That's good for scaling up. Like if you're on a really good team, like on a championship level team, you have a bunch of good players. If you need the ball a lot of the time, it could be an issue, you know. Because, you know, like if he, I think that was one of those, like Jeremy Lin. That was one of his main issues when he got traded from the Knicks, is that he went to a team where there was just better guys with the ball than him. So he had to play off ball, but he just was not good off ball. You know, he was mainly a guy who was good with the ball. You know, so it's really good scaling up if you're really good off ball, because you know you can be super effective while also this other guy's also being super effective. You know, if you have just players that are super good, you know, on ball, you know, you can only have one player being super effective at one time, which, you know, is not good for a 5-player sport, you know.
Indiana sets up a pick and roll with Miller on the weak side here, and as the defense rotates, he repositions himself as a
Rick Smits.
high-value target behind the three-point line. His shooting helped the Pacers' spacing. John Starks is hugging him instead of sagging off and helping, and that makes plays like this easier. In transition, Dennis Scott literally face guards Miller. He's so afraid of him, and suddenly it's an easy drive for Mark Jackson. And this is similar to
For that to be a thing where you have to face guard him on the 3-point line and transition in the 90s is actually pretty
the
crazy.
gravity we've seen from
That's how you know he had insane gravity, especially for the time.
Curry, where opponents will glue a defender to him for an entire possession, willing to play 4-on-4, or in
Right.
transition, they'll literally move out of the way of ball handlers to chase him to the three-point line. Miller's gravitational
Nuts.
force wasn't quite as severe as Curry's back then, in
Right.
large part because of cramped spacing. A second defender jumps at him here, but there's an extra body in the lane, so
Okay, so this also makes sense why it could be also harder to get a 3 at this time. Because, well, yeah, there's less defenders outside because, you know, of the cramped spacing in the paint. But also, that also means that the defenders are less spread out. So if a guy can switch onto you, go onto you much faster from just going to the paint to your area on the 3-point line, despite and not they're all just all spread out a lot further, so it's a lot harder to get to you if they're all around the 3-point line. So that also makes sense. Okay, that kind of goes against my point earlier.
so Smits ends up popping for a jumper. But Reggie did create
I don't like watching Rick Smits play, bro. When I watch those early games, bro, he's like 7'3", and he's taking mid ranges. It pisses me off. But bro, be a dominating paint presence, bro. Come on,
for
man.
teammates without the ball. They're down 3 in the final minute here, and this incredible cut after passing draws a defender away from the hoop and leaves Antonio Davis all alone.
Ooh.
We've talked about Curry's screen gravity before, where defenders don't want to leave him because they're hyper-focused on his movement. And Miller's screens had a similar impact, occupying opponents instead of showing or switching to help. And like Curry, defenders were
So, you know, he only averaged like 3 assists a game, right? So you might say, oh, he wasn't that good of a playmaker. Well, you look at this. I mean, these are a lot of plays that are made for his teammates, you know, that are created because of Reggie Miller, you know. So I would say, yeah, that definitely boosts, you know, his playmaking ability, even though it's not just in the assist cat. You wouldn't see it in the stats, you know, but it's there.
weary of guarding him traditionally. So
That's why I say, like, I would say Steven Adams right now in modern NBA is one of the best playmakers in the NBA. You know, you wouldn't think so when you really think of best playmakers in the NBA, you're not gonna think of fucking Steven Adams, but the amount of, you know, plays he makes from his goddamn screens are so good, and his offensive rebounding are so good. You know, I would say he's one of the best playmakers in the NBA.
So they didn't always look at the ball because they were so worried about losing Reggie on a cut. We've seen Curry's movement tug defenders off handoffs, where
this is kind of like a half a Curry video too. Talking about he's really comparing him to Curry.
Keep it and spring
entire
free
video.
for a layup. And Miller had that same.
Why do you have to do it against the Mavericks,
where
bro?
a teammate can keep it and
There's a Western Conference Finals 2022 Game 3.
spring
God damn
free
it.
for a layup.
We won. No, we didn't win this game. I remember we went down 3-0. God damn it.
And Miller had that same gravitational effect where multiple defenders followed him. But again, the spacing prevents an easy layup. Of course, Steph is known for pulling defenders with him in his wake around screens, creating open layups.
Yeah.
And Miller was the original master of this, tugging defenders into his orbit to create easy dunks. This never shows up in the stat sheet, but it's high leverage playmaking. And
that's what I said,
in
yeah.
the congested
I was right.
spacing of the 90s, these gravitational assists were available every few games. And often in playoff situations when teams reacted to his scoring outbursts. With 3 minutes left in Game 7 of the '94 Conference Finals, he curls off a screen and sidesteps into a three to make it a 2-point game. With 2 minutes to play, Starks took away that left block screen, so Miller
doesn't want to make all these goddamn clutch shots, you know. I've seen a lot of clutch shots from Reggie Miller and the fucking things I've seen.
out the other side for a long.
Would you say he's one of the most clutch players in the 90s?
To make it a 1-point game. And finally, the third time they ran the action, Reggie drew a second defender, and that gravity created the go-ahead layup with 35 seconds left.
Clutch time gravity.
We know Miller could stress defenses with his movement and shooting, but was there more to his game?
He kind of has like a Tyrese Halliburton jump shot.
And was he just lucky to play?
Wait, Tyrese Halliburton is a great shooter too. Maybe more people should try a jump shot like that.
On good teams, or was he actually the driving force that led Indiana to 5 conference finals in 7 years?
Damn, that's actually crazy. 5 conference finals in 7 years? What kind of Detroit Pistons shit? Only 1 finals though. That's crazy. Always going against the damn Bulls.
Today we run through the backstop. Yep. He did whatever it took to get open, and you knew he was shooting a jump shot. And the bad part about it was, you didn't want to foul him.
Reggie sparked a long line of movement shooters, from Richard Hamilton to Ray Allen and Klay Thompson. But a sizable part of his game actually came off the dribble. Miller liked that classic triple threat position where he could face up and just shoot, or put it on the deck and work his way into a pull-up jumper over his defender.
Ooh, nice fake.
His height helped him here because at 6'7", he had a high enough
pretty good
release
height
to shoot
for
over
a
bigger
great shooter.
opponents. Reggie
Damn
was
good
also
height
an
for a
early
great shooter.
adopter of the step back, yet another shot he
Hey.
hit while moving away from the basket.
Hey.
Miller also...
Remember when Paul Pierce said he invented the step back? y'all seen that clip? You know, you have the Kareem skyhook, you know, the Vince Carter dunk, the Dirk fadeaway, the Paul Pierce step back.
So had a floater that always looked off balance but was somehow under control, and he could shoot this off
That does
one
look off
leg,
balance.
or he could lean in off 2 feet as well. This floater in particular highlights his tough shot making, where he could split a pick.
Yeah, I've seen him make some tough ass shots. Ooh, the cross.
Floated off the glass. And he had some
Beautiful
serious
touch,
range
just
on
in
this
general.
puppy, pulling up from like 19 feet and drifting it off the window. And this goes back to that body
These are
control
nasty
he
floaters.
has, getting into shots from so many different angles. Reggie could catch and flow into his shot in every direction. And I'm not sure there's ever been a better shooter twisting into shots on the move than Miller. The pass is a bit wide on this one, and so he reverse pivots into a 23-footer, which is insane. And these are all technically assisted field goals, but really they're just difficult scoring moves from Miller on the move. When you look at his shot
tough
form,
fadeaway,
his
man.
shooting is even more mind-bending. A traditional
right.
technique uses the guide hand to stabilize the ball and the shooting hand to snap the wrist toward the hoop. But
Right.
Miller uses the thumb on the guide hand to push it, then turns his wrist inwards so his hands clap together. And if you can shoot 92% from the free throw line like that, I think you deserve a private bedroom when you stay at a Wendy's. Maybe it's just me. Now,
Hey.
Reggie couldn't easily go
I like that breakdown of
to
his
the
jump
mid
shot right
or
there.
low post and generate a high percentage shot on demand. But he could clear out, put it on the floor, and score right over tight coverages at times. He just didn't do this a ton.
I think the main weird part you see there is when his hands clap together at the end of the jump shot. That's what makes it look so weird.
Because, well, some of these are really hard
Ooh.
shots. And he was probably more efficient creating
Right.
space with his off-ball movement versus contested shots off the dribble. I think
Makes
an even
sense.
bigger reason he was less on ball in his offensive approach was his limited dribbling game. He couldn't always split the pick and roll cleanly like this, and sometimes it just looked like he had butterfingers where he'd lose the ball off his left hand when he felt a little bit
Yeah, I
of
haven't
pressure.
seen that many dribbling highlights
Take a
from
play
him.
like this,
compared
where
to other
Reggie
players,
up-fakes
yeah.
past his defender,
I've seen some
and
messy
there's
plays, but
room
you
to
know.
cross over and slither into this space, but he almost never dribbled in traffic. In this one, he breaks out in transition and tries a toothless in-and-out dribble, which throws off his finishing a little.
No.
He actually wasn't
looked
a
nasty,
great
though.
finisher around the basket in traffic either, and some of that was just a lack of verticality on many of these shots. But he also wasn't very
Well, not getting that over
bendy and
Ewing.
malleable with his body or the ball when he was up in the air. However, Reggie was quick, so he could use that first step for
Yeah,
a
very
straight
quick.
line drive,
Woo.
and defenders had to worry about his shooting, which could briefly expose them to his penetration.
Pause.
Reggie really used that speed in transition, where he turned the game into a track meet.
Oh
and
my god, yeah, that was
outran
insane speed right
defenders.
there.
He could do this off of makes. He's in the paint when this goes in, then runs a 30-yard dash in under 4 seconds for a layup.
Damn.
By the
Oh, I
way,
got
this is part of why
blocked.
his defensive rebounding numbers were so low. He was always looking to leak out in transition, and since he played with so many good rebounders, he was strategically deployed to take off and run opportunistically.
Oh, look at that touchdown. Oh my god.
He was also the
That
first
was
star
insane.
in
What
NBA
kind of Kevin
history
Love?
to run
Yeah, makes
to
sense,
the
though.
three-point line in transition. And
Right.
while we often overlook transition offense, this was a dangerous little element in Miller's game. The other thing all that speed does is force teams to foul. And
Dude, a transition 3 in a close game is always hype as fuck.
marching to the line was a massive part of Miller's scoring. Here he uses the threat of that transition 3 to blow by a defender for a friendly playoff foul. And he
Friendly
drew a
playoff foul.
ton of calls
No, it was the 90s.
by just hurling himself deep into the paint. This is where that up fake into a quick first step puts so much pressure on
Makes
defenses.
a lot
And
more
at just
easier fouls.
185 pounds, contact bounced
You know,
him
when you're off your
around
feet.
and was easy to see for officials. I would say he was even better at creating contact on his drives
Ooh.
than actually finishing at the rim. He turns the corner here.
You know, when you shoot 92% of the free throw line, you don't need to finish. You know, if you can find a way to get
and
fouled all
make
the
sure
time.
to
You know,
slightly
so
jump
I
into
think
the
that's a good
defender,
exchange.
And that's all it takes to go flying. Miller was an early adopter of leaning into contact on jumpers to draw whistles. He had a primitive version of the rip-through move.
I know he had the move where he would like kick his leg when he shot a 3. He would like kick his leg out and pretend he got fouled on a 3-point shot, and they had to make a specific rule so that you can't do that because of him. I think that was Reggie Miller, right?
He's
I'm pretty
actually
damn
trying
sure.
to dribble here, but then
I'll see if he talks about that.
accentuates the contact.
The rip
when
through,
he
yeah.
feels it,
That one mainly got changed when Kevin Durant did it a lot,
because
didn't it?
Indiana's in the bonus. And he was just a master of feeling a little hit and exaggerating it for the nearest referee.
Hey, you gotta respect it. You gotta respect it, you know.
Reputation for flopping and embellishing plays, but in the games
Flopping.
I watched, most of these were fouls that he just made sure everyone knew about. Despite his limited ball
Yeah.
handling,
People say people didn't flop in the 90s. I'm just saying. Y'all never seen Reggie Miller play,
Miller
bro? I
still
mean, look at
generated
these
free
plays,
throws
man. These are
like
funny.
an elite penetrator, taking
worked,
over
though.
8 attempts every 75 possessions in the playoffs at his peak. In the three-point era, the only guards to make free throws more frequently were James Harden, Dwayne Wade,
Makes sense.
Michael
Makes
Jordan,
sense.
and
Makes
Russell
sense.
Westbrook.
All makes sense. You have three, slashing guards, all always getting to the rim, and then, James Harden, foul merchant. Everyone knows. But then you have Reggie Miller there. He looks off. He looks like he doesn't fit with the others, but it's mainly just because of how good he is at selling every call, even though he's not that much of a to the rim type player, like Jordan, Wade, and Westbrook are. Kind of like Harden, kind of the same thing with Harden. Though I would say Harden is more of a get to the basket player, but I don't know. Yeah, that's a really interesting chart right there.
Whew. Reggie's also known as the inventor of the leg kick.
And also really good when you're a 90% free throw shooter. Like that's a super good sign.
But Doug Collins
the leg
used to
kick,
try
yeah,
this
that's right.
in the 70s, and Miller didn't really do it until later in his career. This
Okay.
little leg flare was one of 2 kicks I saw in all the games I rewatched. Even with his exaggerations, his game just organically generated free throws. When he feels pressure, he picks up the...
He does a lot of fakes. Fakes naturally get you free throws. So if someone bites on it, it's a large chance they're going to foul you.
dribble, then goes to the floater when he feels contact. And continuation was much stricter back then. This is a foul on the floor because Kobe did not pick it up before contact. But remember, Miller naturally ended his dribble early
Yeah, that'd definitely be an and one
went
now.
to the floater. So he ended up with a ton of free throws on jump shots like this. He
Damn.
also used the threat of
crazy.
his shot to set up defenders, throwing an up and
Right.
under here to just drop it on someone's head. And
Oh
after
my
this
God.
legendary
He
cut
made
where
that
he
shit.
ran
That was
around the
insane.
screen in a circle, Reggie up-faked Horace Grant into purgatory for more free
Yeah, these fakes always going to
throws.
get people, man.
And
Especially when he
watch
can
him
make
grab
shots
his
like that
own man
very
to
accurately.
create a moving screen that forces Orlando into that switch. Miller had a deep bag of, let's say, not so legal tricks, holding and grabbing to break free, and watch him pull
He's a skinnier player. He's not going to get called as much for
Danny
those.
Manning out of the paint on this play to open up a teammate.
Literally pulling him out of the damn paint. Oh my god. I know that famous clip when he hit that game winner, I think it was the 98 conference finals, where he just straight shoves Michael Jordan. I love that play. It just shows you how much, I mean, fouls are normally not called at the end of games, but especially during this time, you can just shove. If it's the last second, bro, you can just straight have a wrestling match the final seconds. There is just no rules.
Here's
And he made the shot,
Reggie
too.
explaining his perfectly by-the-book techniques.
So first you want to kind of grab a little bit. And you want to act like you're getting held when really you're doing the holding. So you're like, ref, ref. So
This was all incredibly
That's smart,
irritating
man.
for opponents.
I can
Hooking a
imagine.
defender and then accentuating contact for more free throws. And Ty Corbin looks like he's going through the stages of grief. And he wasn't the
Dude, that's
only
gotta be so annoying to play again. Can you imagine? Dude just grabbing your arm and going, I'm being held.
one left with emotional vertigo
Oh my God.
after going through Miller's mind games. Some opponents took out that frustration physically, and he pushed a ton of players past their breaking point.
Hey, Reggie Miller is the only player in NBA history to get into a fight mid-game with both Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. I mean, that's
Including
impressive.
John Starks in the 1993
Oh yeah,
playoffs.
the Knicks
I was
rivalry,
so
of course.
mad. I mean, like, oh man, I'd want to just take my fist and just put it right through his face.
John Starks in the
Very agonizing. I can see why he has so many damn rivals.
8 playoffs. Kobe Bryant wanted to try some shadow boxing with
Yeah,
him
here we
one
go.
time after a game, and some guy in Chicago snapped
Some
and
guy in
tried
Chicago.
to gouge his eyes out, and naturally Reggie was the only player ejected. The thing is,
Duh, of
Miller
course.
thrived off this heightened energy, and he would take the physicality and hit right back.
Oh,
This is from the decisive Game
nice.
5 against Atlanta in 1996, where Miller played just 3 weeks after fracturing his eye socket in a collision. He
Ooh.
constantly checked
Sounds
in and
painful.
out of the game, sometimes playing only single possessions to carry an otherwise faltering offense while sucking oxygen on the sideline during breaks.
Oh my God.
Reggie poured in
I've never heard of this game. Holy shit, bro. Bro had to suck oxygen during the stoppage of plays. Holy fuck.
While
That's actually
sucking
insane.
oxygen on the sideline during breaks, Reggie poured
What
in
the
29
fuck?
points in 31
29
minutes.
29 points in 31 minutes. Well, a fractured eye socket. Having to breathe in air on the sidelines. Oh my
including
god.
16 of Indiana's final 20 to spark
What?
a fourth quarter comeback.
I've
And
probably
in the
never heard of this game, bro. This shit's legendary. What the hell?
final minutes, with the Pacers trailing by 2, he launched this 30-foot pull-up to finally put them in the lead.
Dude, this should be... Dude, if Michael Jordan did this, you'd hear about this shit every single day. Like, I mean every day. Like, there would not be one day where you just talk about NBA at all where they would not bring up this shit, you know? This shit would be talked about in every GOAT debate. But just because it's Reggie Miller, you know, a bit more of an obscure player, you know, people just don't talk about this shit.
10 seconds
This is
to
actually
play and
insane.
down by a bucket. They went back to Miller. The Hawks doubled him, and his game winner fell just short.
Oh.
So this game has been lost to history.
Because it was
But
a loss. Oh
encapsulates
my
how
god.
difficult he could be to slow
That's still
down,
insane, though.
and how he
Still
could raise
insane.
his game when the time called for it, which might explain why Indiana was so difficult to eliminate in the playoffs.
Here we go, going to the playoff stats now.
If I had to pick a team that gave us the toughest time in the East, Indiana was probably the toughest outside of Detroit.
When contenders from the 1990s are brought up, Miller's
Makes sense into Game 7, 98.
Pacers are rarely mentioned, with Clyde Drexler's Blazers, Charles Barkley's Suns, the Sonics, Jazz, or even the Knicks. But Indiana was arguably better than most of these teams in the playoffs. If we look at postseason point differential,
There's not brought up as much because they never made the damn finals in the 90s because they can never get past Jordan.
and adjust for opponent quality, the mid-90s Pacers have a better 3-year run than any of those teams outside of Utah.
Damn.
They were nearly as good again at the end of the decade under Coach Larry Bird, and all of these teams look like excellent offenses in the playoffs despite a lack of star power. The early 90s Pacers were
Only one
already really
superstar.
good offensively, but they never made it out of the first round due to their lackluster defense. So on the eve of the 1994 season, new coach Larry Brown traded their second best offensive player, 3-time All-Star Detlef Schrempf, for a versatile defender named Derek McKee. The 7'4" Rick Smits emerged as a second scoring weapon next to Miller, giving them a high-end post-up option to balance Miller's movement-heavy actions. With Antonio and Dale Davis, Indiana added more rebounding and defense around Miller and Smits, and suddenly they were difficult to eliminate for just about anyone. To offset Schrempf's offensive loss, Brown ran more screening actions for Miller, while teammates waited for him to scramble the defense. And McKee was such a great fit because he had some serious passing chops himself. This gave Indiana a little more playmaking, especially outside the paint. And critically, when Miller or Smits were doubled, it gave them a fantastic extra passer. I love their synergy. Smits is doubled in the post, quickly hits McKee, who can use Miller's shooting threat to fake out this defender, and then Smits ends up cleaning up on the rebound.
A nice
so
vision
those
there.
Pacers could flow from Miller's screening actions right into a single coverage
Smits is so
post-up
tall,
for
bro.
Smits, or they could run Reggie around a series of picks, and McKee could take advantage of Miller's gravity.
They seem like a very
This
advanced team for the
passing was
time.
so helpful,
like the
because
90s
neither
Phoenix
Smits
Suns.
nor Miller
Like,
were
the
strong
90s version of the 2000s Phoenix Suns.
distributors. Reggie's
Like a lot
open
more
there,
outside shooting, even their 7'4" center, you know, with a more
they mostly hit basic passes
bit more of a
instead
outside
of more
shooter.
advanced skip passes. So McKee could be the one to move it along to the open man in those situations. Miller's ball handling probably hurt his on-ball playmaking, but he also just misses Smits on the cut here for a less potent kick out. This is where Curry was able to extend the blueprint beyond off-ball movement. Steph added elite ball handling that turned him into an unheard of pull-up threat.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
And that ball handling security freed up mental space for really good passing, too.
Right, okay, so
Compare
that
to
leads to
Reggie,
that. That makes
who
sense.
uses more processing power to set up this crossover, so he completely misses
Basically, this whole video is explaining how Steph Curry is the super version of Reggie Miller.
Smith running free to the rim and ends up doing it himself anyway.
Ooh.
Miller was always a very willing passer who understood the right play.
Yeah,
but
never
he
a
was
ball
more of
hog, definitely.
reactionary passer rather than someone who anticipated openings. In transition here,
Makes sense.
he doesn't realize a teammate is going to outrun
More of
everyone
a
down
basic
the court,
passer.
so he never pulls the trigger on it. And he's much more comfortable with a pass like that when he can actually see it open up like this.
Ooh.
Here's a trickier version in the half court where Antonio Davis is briefly open, and this requires anticipating the double or that cut into open space, and nothing happens, so they just reset. I do think Miller's passing improved a little as the decade progressed. He's bothered by some pressure here around a screen and just completely misses an open shooter. But 6 years later in pick and roll, he's able to read the slip and throw it over the top nicely.
Nice evolution
I think he was
there.
a little more under control on drives in those later years. And by 93 or 94, he always looked for an early pocket pass in pick and roll situations, which could free up a shooter or get the roll man headed downhill. Even with his passing limitations, he could still create offense for teammates with all that attention he drew. Teams were worried about his shooting, so sometimes just a
once again,
basic
the playmaking
kick-out generated wide open offense. This blended into his
Once
off-ball
again,
game, where he
as we
fly
said
off the
earlier,
screen
a
and
billion
draw
times now,
extra
the gravity.
defenders, and simple passes set up easy shots. On this,
So yeah, you don't have to be an elite passer to get a lot of playmaking here, just because of how you can get easy passes because the teammates are more open because of just how good his gravity was.
curl action, he learned to hit the screener over the years, although he was inconsistent with this pass, sometimes misreading the play like this. But when he started taking over games down the stretch, teams would send multiple defenders at him to force someone else to beat them. With the Pacers down 3 in the final game against the Bucks, Milwaukee sends half the city out to defend him, leading to this wide open 3 to tie the game.
Yeah, that's wide open.
And in the waiting seconds of this playoff game in
Come on, guys.
Orlando, the Magic play a game of anybody but Reggie, which frees up Byron Scott for the win.
So much help. That's some Curry shit right there, 100%.
Miller is known for his endless clutch theatrics.
That's the play I was talking about, where he just shoves Jordan.
Miller is known for his
Yo,
endless
just absolutely shoves him. Made it, though. Fade away.
And down the stretch of key games.
Clutch-ass
where his
moment.
stone-cold shooting so often put Indiana in front. And for whatever reason, he ramped up his aggression in the playoffs. There are moments when I'm watching him and wondering why he doesn't look to score, and then I realize I'm watching a regular season game. Because in the postseason, he was constantly hunting weaknesses and pushing the issue, which spiked his playoff scoring compared to his regular season numbers. When we adjust for opponent
mentality
quality,
change,
Miller looks like one of the very best scorers in all of NBA history.
Wow,
Only
that's actually
Kareem
crazy.
Abdul-Jabbar and maybe Dirk Nowitzki can match his volume and efficiency over a sustained stretch.
That's actually insane. Actually, I really hope there's an episode of this going to be on Dirk. You know, I love me some Dirk Nowitzki, you know, Dallas Mavericks.
And
I really hope there is one on Dirk, but that's actually insane.
More mind-blowing is that Miller has another 5-year run later in his career that's close to Curry's peak playoff scoring.
Damn.
And still looks better than someone like Charles Barkley at his peak.
Whoa, okay, 2 dominant 5-year runs.
Back then,
that's actually
no one
crazy.
noticed how prolific he was as a scorer because most published stats were about the regular season, where Miller scored an incredible 5 fewer points per game during these peak years.
That's actually insane. That is one of the biggest, you know, playoff jumps I've ever heard of.
We don't
God
have
damn.
plus-minus data in the playoffs for those mid-90s seasons.
So he was like a, what, 21 point per game score in the regular season, then a 26 point per game score in the playoffs. You know, while, you know, remember, this is the 90s, you know, and early 2000s, you know, the lowest scoring era in NBA history, so that's even less than, you know, it's deflated.
But we do have it for the regular season back to 1994. And Miller looks like a big impact player on good teams, but short of the very best. Fittingly, that outlier in the upper right is Steph Curry, who took
Makes
the Miller
sense.
archetype to new heights. The playoff plus-minus we do have for Reggie at the end of his career looks similar in impact, but I wonder if it's more impressive at his peak given those incredible scoring numbers. In 94-95, the Pacers were just 2-9 when his true shooting was under 55%, but when it was over 55%, they went an incredible 18-4. Either way, his playoff scoring
Really
and
relying on him.
off-ball movement were the centerpiece of some of the most successful offenses of the decade. And even though he wasn't fully appreciated back then, Reggie Miller paved the road for future generations.
Too ahead of his time, baby. Too ahead of his
And
time.
was an offensive legend who was truly ahead of his time. If
Yeah.
you want more content,
All right, so that was Offensive Legend episode 2 on Reggie Miller. So what did you think of that? You know, what would you rank Reggie Miller among players in the '90s? You know, how do you think Reggie revolutionized the game? I thought it was a pretty damn good video. You know, about his impact. You know, if anything, so a lot of people say Reggie Miller is overrated. I've heard a lot of people say that. I would say, if anything, I think that taught me a lot. I would actually say he's probably underrated. You know, it's just how much impact he had. You know, so yeah, what were you thinking on players in the '90s, and anything else you have to say? Go subscribe to my original content channel. First link in the description. Make sure to watch the original video. The second link in the description. And yeah, bye.